So just a bit of a summary on what's happening for you guys this year.
Yeah, so we've got a project that we launched at the end of last year called Putney Wharf with one of our joint venture partners, I think, here today, Aberdeen, Mitsubishi and PPI. So that was it's a very successful project thus far. I'm very excited by it. And this year we've just started construction and progressing the sales. We also have a number of sites in the Lower North Shore in the west and down in the Shire that we've acquired that are going through all different sorts of processes with the state government, whether it's the HDA, TOD, housing SEP, normal DA, combination of the above, so navigating the planning system. And we've actually just acquired a couple of sites in Western Australia as well.
Oh. Thank you. We've currently got about $4 billion in the pipeline across Australia and New Zealand. We've got a PPP with the City of Adelaide next to the market's central market in Adelaide CBD. It's a redevelopment of the old Market Arcade, 8,000 square metre site, which will effectively be doubling the floor print of the central market and doing a mixed-use development above. So office, residential and hotel under construction at the moment. Pre-sold about 90% of the apartments and 60% of the office, as well as engaged with SH Group, which is now back to the old Starwood branding to do a tree house. And we recently acquired a site in Brisbane, along the Brisbane River, in West End. We're targeting to do about 7 towers there, precinct, mixed use. A particular focus around the build to sell. It's the highest and best use around there, especially with the Brisbane Olympics coming up. The most well known for people here would be the City Tattersalls Club redevelopment, which is along Pitt and Market in the city, and that's going to be launched as Sydney House sometime this year.
Well, it's good to be sitting here February, 2025, because went back 12 months ago, that was one of the worst years I've experienced in what we do. Luckily, we're surrounded by amazing people. We've got some great projects over some TODs. The transport orientated development in Crow's Nest would be one that we're very proud of, and we're navigating that through a planning process to unlock some more value there. Lots happening in Newcastle, which is a really strong regional centre for us. So some big announcements coming out of that. Our land business has grown to 3,500 lots under development within 1.5 hours of Sydney. We've got some stuff happening in Queensland. And then a few things in London. It's our 6th year in London, and we've got some cool stuff sort of bubbling away in the build-to-rent sector over there, or co-living. So some great stuff all round.
Got a bit on. So how do you see, kind of from a buyer point of view, what are the market segments that you think are going to perform well in 2025, and how does that kind of impact some of your thinking when you're kind of working on these projects?
2024 was a tough year, but it was also a defining year in the sense that there's certain projects under a sales threshold just that you can't get off the ground from a viability perspective. So I think we're all playing in the same patch by and large, which is really looking at projects that one of the numbers I heard, I think in November last year was, unless you've got a project that's selling for an average of about $18,000 a square metre in Sydney, you probably don't have much of a chance to get it off the ground. So therefore that points you into certain jurisdictions of this market, and that's probably in those areas that we're all playing in right now. I think the rail corridors and where the government's spending a lot of infrastructure investment, they're a no-brainer for most, and I think that's just a matter of a timing game in the sense of how long will it take to get something approved under these new planning regimes that exist. So giving that certainty. I mean, the other project I forgot to mention earlier was our Crow's Nest development. It's really in those markets, in that Lower North Shore, in eastern suburbs every day of the week, inner west, certain markets there, and then certain spots in and around Sydney or Greater Sydney that have got that price point.
Yeah, I think we've all gone through a shocking last couple of years, and the market has been front and centre with our Sydney project, and for us there's probably 2 milestones that we want to see head over, and one was yesterday, certainty around interest rates. The next one would be certainty around who's going to be leading this country with the election coming up. More than, I guess, the actual impact of the interest rates on borrowing capacity, it's about sentiment for us. And we're already seeing it in the existing property market, and we see generally a lag to the off-the-plan new house market, and so we expect that in the next couple of months to flow through. With the last couple of years, the other 2 big factors have really been around the capital aspect of things and construction pricing, which has brought on a lot of uncertainty to feasibilities. What we're seeing and hearing is deflation in the Chinese material market, which is a good half of the equation for construction. And with that brings greater certainty and hopefully feasibility to projects. And we're starting to see that in the activity of more supply.
So do you see that deflation in China really having a positive impact on the supply, the cost of materials and things like that?
Absolutely. For one of our contracts with a builder, because it was engaged during the uncertain times, we take some trade risk, and so we continue to let up in tandem with them and to understand where things were budgeted when we first went into this with them and where they sit now. Some of the trade packages, because of the domestic market in China, is flat or non-existent. You're seeing 10, 15, 20% reductions in some of the material pricing, and that can be quite substantial for big packages like facade.
Yeah, I suppose what's happening, it's an election year. Housing and affordability has never been more on the top end of everyone's consciousness. So we're shaping our acquisition strategy to focus on affordability. The numbers don't lie. We're one of the best industries when you understand the numbers. You've got pockets of Sydney like Potts Point where you can set all sorts of records, particularly if you've got Ben Stewart on your project. But then you've got areas that you've got to really work hard at to get them to stack. And if you think about the numbers, 1.4 million is our average or median in Sydney. That's what most people can afford on a $130,000 salary. So you've got to think, where are we going to be able to build something that's north of 18,000 a square metre, because otherwise the land goes in your FISOs at zero and no one's going to give you land to develop on. So we're watching what's going to happen with the government stimulus, because if you look back, 3 booms have come off the back of the first home buyers grants in 2006-07. Then it was the post-COVID, there was another range of stimulus. The Housing Accord targets 1.2 million homes over the next 5 years. We're between 24 and 29, we're in 2025. So I think that when you look at the numbers, there's big opportunities coming, and we're focusing on those to shape our acquisition and growth strategy.
And so on that, with the locations, you've obviously got the Crow's Nest project on top of the train station. How do you kind of think about the trade-off between the price of the site and therefore the competitiveness of that process often, and the type of amenity that's in the area? And how do you kind of assess the different trade-offs?
Yeah, so when you think about the marriage of convenience, amenity, the build and the location, they've all got to be in it at the moment, right? Like if you're not in the right location, you don't have transport solved, you don't have amenity like Coles or health and wellness, then you're really going to find it hard to attract the buyers to then underwrite your projects. So location's key, but it's interesting, the stats showing between 23 and 24, 23 was a really strong period, and then 24, most markets had some sort of decline or balancing out. And what we've focused on is there's premium suburbs within markets, and it's the city fringe or the fringe of those premium markets with transport and amenity that are going to perform. So you look at Manly Vale versus Manly, median in Manly's 4.4 million, Manly Vale's 1.4. Manly grew 0.5% last year and Manly Vale grew 10%. So you've got to shape your acquisition strategy and your development strategy around where people can afford to buy. So location's key, transport's key, metros, once in a generation investment in infrastructure. Wouldn't you want to be building above that or next to it? Makes sense. Combine that with the amenity on a fringe location like Crow's Nest, Marrickville, Bladesville, Epping. There is big opportunities in those markets, and that's what we're tracking.
It's really insightful because location, I equate that to the amenity that you design within the tower or the project. It's about getting the right amenity that people want in the area. Public infrastructure with challenges to get into work and other places that the wrong location isn't designed for. I guess when we're looking at our projects, we're thinking about location primarily, but also when it comes to amenity, designing what is going to be used by the majority of the purchasers that are going to look at our project. So our Sydney project will have access to the amenity and services of the hotel and the hotel operations, including the gym, valet parking, and cleaning access as well. So things like that, as well as facilities for work from home, which we've integrated into our Melbourne project as well, Aspire with Simon. Facilities that all the residents will be able to utilise.
I agree with the guys. The only thing I was going to say is that probably just knowing who your buyer profile is, because one of the things that people are also very conscious of, especially the last few years, is strata levies. So, what are things going to cost them post-completion? So I've noticed a lot more questioning on that up front. And so then, supporting what both guys said is location, surrounding amenities, critically important. Hence why development's occurring around certain infrastructure nodes, because they tend to be there, or gives the greatest opportunity for new amenity to come into the area. So really understanding your buyer as best as possible and catering to their needs at the most cost-effective price is really the game.
You guys have all been buying sites against the cycle. What is it that you're looking for in the market to kind of say, yep, now's the time to go?
There's no good time to buy, there's no bad time to buy. I mean, I suppose it's just buying at the right price, right? So you've got to do your research, as Luke was saying. You've got to understand who the buyer profile is, the volume that potentially exists there. Is it a site that will build on your brand and you can be proud of? And I suppose just being really always aware of the geopolitical, macroeconomic factors at all points in time, and numbers never lie. And I don't think it's wise to inflate things. It's just wise to sort of be real. And I think the last 5 years have probably taught a lot of people that you need to be real and not believe your own BS, basically.
Our acquisition strategy has typically been finding the right site with a little bit of complexity and challenge. In a hot market, the problem is other people get a bit desperate as well and are willing to pay more for those sites than what they would be worth. But in the last year, where competition is looking for a much cleaner and easier proposition, it's given us the opportunity to explore these things and find good value. Because I find like if you're catering for everything that you intend to deliver in the land price, you can get unstuck when construction prices move 30% and finance goes up 13 clicks. So you got to leave a little bit of fat, especially for larger projects, because it becomes harder to wriggle out of it.
Yeah, a feasibility, I don't know how many times you put a number in and you've got a couple of levers to pull, right? Your land and your revenues, and then the builder. So ensuring that there's always some level of contingency in there. And again, it just comes back to the numbers. Like Fab said before, you've actually got to believe in the numbers and not your gut, right? You've got to just base your acquisition on today, not what you think you're going to be able to achieve in the future. And sometimes you just have to, let a few slip by. And if you stick to that ethos, then typically you don't get caught up with the bad ones that suck all the profit out of the 4 good ones, So, going forward, we're working really hard with some stakeholders on some large sites. We do believe that there's a marriage of build to rent, build to sell and affordable housing, like what we've proven with Crow's Nest. And you combine that with an amazing amenity or retail option, that's the type of projects we want to be in. And hopefully we can, keep finding those and unlocking those for the market.
I think with any strategy, it's all about trade-offs and what are you going to give to get and so forth. And one of the things I was curious on is, would you prefer to develop a project in an area where there's other projects in that area that have recently sold and some of the things that come with that, with increased competition? Or would you prefer to go to a new market, perhaps where there's less historical data recently on selling off the plan? How do you see those two types of trade-offs?
Look, it's, I don't mind trying to go into a market that I believe in and be the first to move a market. I can point to Carraba Point when we did that one together, Benny and the CBRE team. That was a moment where I think we surprised ourselves on what a market was willing to pay to be on a finger in the wharf with uninterrupted views of the Opera House and so forth. Would I want to do that today? Most probably not. I think that type of project is going to perform. But for us, I'm looking at, Mirvac, that they reported recently about their middle ring is outperforming every other market. And I think that's what you've got to listen to, their numbers, our numbers. And are we going to try and build more $20 million plus penthouses? Most probably. I'm going to be pursuing more aggressively the stock that's 20 to 25,000 a square metre, because that's what people can afford and that's what's going to sell.
You're asking guys, we were moving to Adelaide to do a $500 million project. It'd be hypocritical if I said that we wouldn't explore that. But in doing so, it is about doing your research and backing yourself with doing that type of development in an area which hasn't typically seen 13,000 a square metre apartments or $10 million penthouse. But you've also got to be prepared to work hard. What we've found in moving into new areas, especially in the current climate, is you'll get a lot of resistance from build and from finance and purchasers as well, because there's that uncertainty of, are they doing the right thing? But if they can start to see the vision that you saw in going into that market, and then it will work out okay. But it's a lot of hard work. As opposed to, say, our Sydney project where we've commenced construction without pre-sales, we're that confident that the market will be there when we do launch. And there's positive to that as well. But generally, you come across a lot more competition when you're in those high supply, well understood markets.
Yeah, the answer is both can work. Just listening to the guys talk, and I was just reflecting on the journey over the last 20 odd years. And I remember going into Macquarie Park, and actually the CBD's guys were with us in that as well. But at the time, had a train station, had a university, had a shopping centre, had a commercial heart, and it had no new residential development. And so literally it was just greenfields, but the ingredients were right. So that worked. Would I be concerned in going into what I would call a B-grade location, which has no infrastructure amenity and no history of apartments? Absolutely, every day of the week I wouldn't even bother.
What about, obviously you can buy those sites cheaper, develop them cheaper. Like, how does price impact this stuff?
So that used to be the story, but unfortunately construction cost is what it is today, and it's not going to come down. Materials, as Matt was saying, basically I think material supply is probably an opportunity. The Aussie dollars probably might negate some of that, depending on where it goes with the Trump factor. And the other thing is labour costs in this country has never really come down. So construction cost is a big factor in what the decision you make in buying a site. Now, I mean, the government's giving us the direction of where we should invest by where it's investing. So, again, whether it's transport infrastructure, or whether it's retail or health or education and so forth, they're all drivers for decisions going forward. But I think we would all prefer to go into an environment that there is amenity already there, that we're building on what is there, adding value to that precinct and leaving it better off. I mean, Adelaide's an interesting one. I'm an Adelaide boy originally, Matt, but I mean, Adelaide is a CBD at the end of the day. It's a massive development, but it is a CBD. It has a lot of great amenity. It just doesn't have the history of the size of developments that we've been doing here in Sydney. So I think that's a wise choice. Time will tell. Any location can work provided that the ingredients are right. And that is basically you're buying at the right price, you can build at the right price, it's got the right infrastructure amenity and just retail and commercial and other amenity as well. I think Sydney, where we're going, is more urban infill. So I think the market generally accepts it up here. I think we'll see the same in Queensland and the same in Melbourne.
And final thoughts in terms of just the outlook or tips or advice you've got for other people, either developing, selling, marketing, funding, any of the stuff?
Yeah, look, I think it's going to be a year of two halves from my perspective. I think we've got to get our federal election over and done with. So let's hope it's sooner rather than later. Let's hope there's a clear winner. A hung parliament's not going to be good for anyone, I think, in our industry, especially if, dare I say it, the Greens have the balance of power. I think that might be a bit tough. But I think, 2024 is definitely the hard year. I think going forward, whether it's the second half of this year or getting into 2026, I think the medium to long term looks bright. I think we've got a set of dynamics where you've got a government in this state at least that's really focused on delivering housing to the market. They've staked a reputation on it. I don't know if it's a crisis. I was saying it to you before, Mike, and to Diana, but we all talk it's a crisis, but I'm still not seeing the action as if it is a crisis. So, when there's a crisis, you bang heads together, you get the finance industry together, you get the property industry together with construction and government, and you basically need to deliver housing a lot faster than what it is in this state. So when you think about this state, it takes 5 to 7 years to deliver an apartment. That's an absolute joke. So, we need to be delivering it a lot faster than that. You go back to my Macquarie Park analogy. I mean, that was literally bringing stock to market in 3.5 years. So something's gone wrong, and we need to all fix it together if we're going to really make a difference, because, there is 1.2 million homes to be delivered in the next 5 years, and quite frankly, I don't think any one of us believe it's doable. I think we'll really talk about it. It'd be nice to get close, right? And unfortunately, close is not good enough. So anyway, the clock has started ticking, the train has left the station, and we need that bullet train, not the rattler.
I agree with Fab. I think there's a lot that needs to change and happen in 2025 and beyond. Innovation, I think, is really going to hit our industry, both in AI, because that's all the talk at the moment, but I also think, and we're exploring a bit of this as well in modular construction, it really addresses those two issues of cost and time. And so if there's any assistance that's needed from bringing forward the housing that's required, I think there's need to be some innovation in how we deliver product. And I think it might have been Simon or someone mentioned around the change of types of products. And I suspect more international models like co-living will hit the Australian market and have an acceptance. And if it was time, then the financiers are accepting that, and you're going to see more capital drawn to those markets to deal with that supply issue.
We work in one of the best industries in Australia. I love the people. It's hard, and my tip is to stay resilient, because I think it is going to be a good second half, and it's going to be a good few years ahead with the right type of projects, and keep challenging ourselves to be the best that we can be. We talk about innovative brilliance as a fundamental thing to our approach to how we buy sites, launch sites and finish them off, and that's something we're really passionate about. Most of the developers in the room, I'm big on the data. We paid a university to do a report on migration and affordability, and they go hand in hand. And the report found that 35% of Sydney-siders would move for affordability. And that tells me that when we're looking for opportunities, it needs to be in markets that provide amenity, that have a good location, great lifestyle. And that's 1.7 million people are willing to move. They can afford a property. Now, when you match that with what they can afford to pay in a mortgage, you can do the math. You can actually go and find a block of land that you can then build a house on, that we can all sell and make a bit of money along the way. And that's most probably my biggest parting tip, is that the numbers are there, and it's never been a better time for government and the private sector aligned on the delivery of housing. So for the funders in the room, if we bring you some sites on the edge of Sydney, hopefully they make more sense because they're backed up with some numbers. But that's where we're focusing, and that transport combined with convenience, combined with amenity, if you get those three and you've got a block of units with a view, you should be able to sell them pretty well, make some money.
Thanks very much, all three of you. Awesome.
Adelaide, yeah?